Virtual reality. So this was a very busy week at work because I had to prepare the latest app for my boss to go to London and do all the stuff with what we're doing there for Shoreditch and all that, but also as a part of that, I needed to prepare my VR presentation for the New York City VR April meetup, where I was opening for the great Ken Perlin, inventor of Perlin noise back in like 1985, which is that thing that gets used in like 3D programs to simulate fire and smoke and water and anything that needs to look kind of random, but you need to do it quickly and efficiently. So there's that. And so I had like a 15-minute presentation and I wanted it to be sharp. I wrote out the whole thing. I tried recording it and listening to myself and trying to get all the beats about right. There were certain things that I could never quite get, exactly the way I wanted, but it was great having Liz look over those things, help critique me, refine it, try to spend some time during lunch breaks. I only had like 2 lunch breaks this week getting all that stuff. Important. How'd it go? I think it went pretty well. If I had to give myself a rating, 4 stars, confidence of 4. I watched it with my wife today. I hadn't actually seen it since it actually happened, and it looked better than it felt. When I was up there, I was getting a little bit nervous, and my voice started to shake a little, and I started to maybe talk a little bit faster, but honestly, you can check out the video. It'll be at the end of this video, or just check it out right here. But I think it comes off pretty well. I think I'm pretty clear with my story, my narrative there. I think it's kind of inspiring for anyone that, is excited about VR but doesn't really know what to do with it. But of course, I'm very aware of certain tendencies I have. Talking fast, of course, is something that I've always done whenever I've been in any kind of public speaking situation. Even singing, like I talked about Into the Woods the other week, like I was always rushing the songs I had to sing in musicals and that kind of thing. So slowing down a little bit, taking a few breaths, calming down, letting the energy level come to an acceptable level, that's something that I've always, I wouldn't say struggled with because it's never bothered me very much, but I understand for other people it can be a little overwhelming sometimes to hear me talk. So I tried to keep that a little bit toned down during the presentation. The overall arc of the presentation was basically me saying, hey, look, I'm an architect and I've got all these other crazy interests, and going into VR, it seemed like something that'd be intimidating, that I'd have a lot of trouble grasping, and it was surprisingly straightforward, and it was nice to find a justification to get VR into my office as an extension of our existing workflow rather than trying to make a bid for it being this totally new thing that we needed to invest a lot of time and energy into. And then I went into talking about starting with the Oculus and learning Unity, and then eventually needing a portable solution, so going to Google Cardboard, and then eventually, through things like the Global Game Jam and other situations where I was learning coding, having another way in to approach the apps that I needed to make, which ultimately made better apps. Video games, multidisciplinary things, come back to architecture, make everything better, good stuff. And so the app that I ended up giving to my boss actually worked out really well. On Friday, I had the app pretty much done on Thursday. Friday I had some time to refine. We were working on more presentation stuff. Actually, Friday was kind of a late night working to just get all the details right. But I'm really happy with the way the app turned out. There's a ton of different design options in there. Everything, we're doing like a wire rope grid up top, and that's looking really cool. I recommend you check out the whole presentation I gave. I think it worked out pretty well. I actually had some really cool introductions to people after. There was like a demo session and people came to talk to me, and some of these people like gave off an air of like, I'm really important, listen to what I have to say. And I was getting pitched all sorts of things, which is kind of cool. And some guy wants me to fly to India and teach people VR there. And most excitingly, Philip Rosedale, the inventor of Second Life, that virtual world that's going to become basically like Oasis in Ready Player One, he was actually at this thing probably to support Ken Perlin, and he actually approached me after the whole meetup because he wanted to talk about theater acoustics and this software he's doing now, where it's a big open source VR thing called High Fidelity, and how he thinks that'd be a great solution for us for the acoustics part of theater design. And he tried out my app, and that was really cool, and everyone was like, oh my god, Philip Rosedale's trying out your app! And I filmed it for like 30 seconds. Maybe I'll tag that at the end of the other VR video, but that was kind of crazy and great to get his feedback. Ken Perlin's presentation, which was like an hour and a half, was really exciting. There was kind of like a magic trick quality to it as he was talking about his vision for the future of VR and what it looks like in 15 years and 30 years. And he was doing this thing where he'd like draw something and then touch it, and then it would animate and interact with other things that he was drawing and touching. And I think Jules Fisher, one of the heads of Fisher Dax Associates, because in addition to being a lighting designer, he also loves magic and magic tricks. He would have really loved this stuff, so I wonder if there's a way I could show him. But my friend Max Dumas, who actually was on my Global Game Jam team and played a part in the narrative I was trying to tell in my whole like video games and architecture story. He also is involved with all the stuff Ken Perlin is doing in VR. You know, they have this whole room that they've outfitted where they wanted to build the room in VR, so when you put on the VR goggles, you see that room, and then from there, like maybe like in the style of the Subtle Knife, the whole Golden Compass series, there's like a tear and an opening, and like Alice going into Wonderland or something, you can go into this virtual world. But anyway, Max was involved with that as well, and I asked him when we were chatting about my presentation and everything afterwards, how Ken pulled off that amazing, like, here's a doodle, blah, it's alive, here's another doodle, blah, that's alive. And Max told me, shh, it's all kind of smoke and mirrors. So still, even then, it looked beautiful, it was really cool. Maybe it looks a little bit like this. Here's a little clip. See how I was quiet there for a second? That's probably the thing I need to work on the most, and my wife agrees with me, is a lot of times when I'm giving a presentation and I want to show a video or something like that, I'm so anxious about not knowing what I should be saying or doing while the other thing is happening, so I talk over it. So I had some clips with audio during my presentation, including the video game thing, and I should have just been quiet for like 10 seconds to let people listen to it and get a sense of what's going on, but I would start playing and I'd be like, and I'm going to keep talking and blah, 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 which, you know, I think just, it can be overwhelming for people again, so I need to learn to just let things happen around me and don't rush, and even if I know that my presentation is running longer than I think it's going to or something like that, there's no reason to speed, relax. And lastly, this is becoming more of a discussion about my presentation style than the content of the presentation itself, which is fine, because it's always useful to, you know, always become a better public speaker and always figure out the best ways to convey information to the masses, kind of like what I'm doing here, is I found myself, I had a bunch of notes, you know, I basically wrote an entire script for what I wanted to say, and this has happened with like my super jury presentation back in architecture school and several other presentations I've given, where it's like I have it all there, and my plan is to go in and just basically, you know, glance at it every bullet point and just be like, okay, I'm talking about this, I'm talking about this, I'm talking about this, and inevitably I start talking, maybe it's the speed at which I'm talking or the fact that I want to like maintain eye contact with someone in the audience, but I never look down at the notes I've given myself, which in some cases means I'm missing some big points and I'm skipping over things. In this situation, I think between, you know, the preparation time I had and the little rehearsals I was able to give myself, like, you know, speaking into my voice recorder and listening to it and then trying again, you know, I actually think that it worked out. I don't think I skipped over any of the main presentation points I wanted to make, whereas in the past I, you know, wouldn't be looking at my notes and I'd skip over something big and be like, why didn't I talk about augmented reality? That's a big part of my thesis or whatever. So all just interesting things for me to be aware of. I wonder if my presentation style is going to change after I become a father. We'll see. I'm sure exhaustion plays a role into everything. So that's VR. I give my presentation from the VR thing 4 stars with a confidence of 4. I give Ken Perlin's presentation 5 stars with a confidence of 3.